Welcome to the first lecture of the 2013 New York Red Bull Music Academy. I have the distinct honor of sitting next to a man who is responsible for a lot of firsts. Remix, 12-inch, breakdown. Mr. Tom Moulton, please give him a hand.
Thank you.
I guess speaking of firsts, what was the first record that you ever bought with your own money? Do you remember?
I remember, but unfortunately no one else in the room would remember. I was 6 years old, and I begged my mother to buy me 1 O'Clock Jump by Count Basie. Anybody remember that?
I don't remember it.
You remember Count Basie? Good.
So were your parents into music?
Well, they each had, they were both musicians.
What kind of musicians?
Well, they thought that they were jazz musicians. I mean, they, to me, were, wedding and, that kind of thing. My father had a quintet, and my mother had a quartet, and they couldn't play together at all because my father's timing was so bad. And she would just come home and fight all the time, saying, why'd you come in? You came in 2 beats too early, and and then my father considered himself a jazz musician. I think that's why his timing was kind of loose when it came to that sort of thing.
So it saved the marriage that they were not in the same group.
No. By the time the 5th kid was born, bye.
So which one were you? of those
I was
five?
the oldest. I'm the first.
Okay.
So
And growing up, so you had jazz in the household. What other sorts of music
pop.
were in the household?
Well, how can I say that? I think I grew up in a wonderful time. I was born in 1940. And during the 40, jazz played a very important part in pop music. And the music to me was incredible in the 40s because of the melodies and the beauty of it and these intricate timings they had. And then, of course, to be a teenager in the 50s when rock and roll started, to me, that was one of the greatest things in my life, to have this totally different kind of music. And everyone said, oh, that crap will never last. And of course, it's still around. So it's like dance music. It's been around since anybody could play an instrument. And, we call it different things now, but it's still dance music. People still like to get up and react emotionally to music. So,
Speaking of rock, I think you went out to California with the dream of being a DJ, a radio DJ, like Alan Freed.
well, actually, that was here.
Okay.
That was here, and then I got very disappointed that they took money to play a record, and I thought, how can you take money to play something? I couldn't relate to that because I thought my dream was to find a record that I like and play it for somebody on the radio, and everybody would like it and they'd get all excited and everything. And then I said they did it for money. I don't understand that. And I said, well, did they like the record? Well, no. If they got the money for it, they'd play it. And I go, well, how do you have any credibility? And I couldn't understand that. So I said, I don't want to be part of that. So I said, as long as I'm involved in the music, somehow I'm going to stay involved with it.
And how did you first get involved with the industry, so to speak?
Well, when I was a kid, I worked in a record store. I'd always go in and ask for a record, and they'd say, oh, who does that? And I would say who it was, and I'd say, well, can you order it for me? And they got so sick of me coming in and asking for a record all the time, they said, look, we'd like you to maybe order the 45s for us, or the 78s and 45s back then. And they said, we'll give you $10 a week plus 5 45s. And I thought, oh man, this is big time. When you're a kid, to get $10 plus 5 records. And I said, oh my Lord, I just couldn't believe it. And I did very well. And then I did it with the other store in town. And I said, I'd like to, order the records here for. And I worked for the other store. And they said, well, what are they giving you? And I said, well, they give me $15 a week and 10.45. So I learned quickly about the music business.
So I wanted to play a song and see if you remember it. Early on in your music career, this is a song that I think meant.
Shouldn't you not be fine? Shouldn't you lower that a little bit before you? Okay.
I'm not getting anything
Because
at
of
all,
an earlier experience today.
matter.
Each time I see you
Oh my God, that's when I worked at Seaburg.
I fall.
So what is this record?
It's I Fall to Pieces by Patsy Cline. When I went out to California, I lied about my age. Because you didn't have to have, to get a driver's license in California or whatever. All you had to do was say, oh, I'm 20 or 21. And I was only 17. And so I said I was 21. I was able to get a driver's license, and that was my ID if I wanted to go to a bar. I wasn't big on drinking anyway. But anyway, I worked for Seaburg. And Seaburg, they made jukeboxes. And they had what they call a one-stop, meaning that instead of going, if you wanted to buy records from RCA, you'd go to RCA Distributor and buy them, and then you go to Columbia, or you go to EMI, or you go to all these different labels, and they would be 41 cents. Now, if you went to a one-stop, the records might be 44 cents. But you're paying for the convenience of only going to a one-stop to get all the records you wanted without going to all these different labels. And in those days, if you bought a record before it became a hit, say if you bought 500, you'd get 250 of them free. And so I was pretty good at that, and that's one of those records that I bought, and I got 250 free, and nobody bought it. And then that happened to another record by a Southern guy called Ernie K. Doe not Ernie K. Doe, it was Jesse Hill called Oop Oop A Doo. And I just thought that was one of the greatest records. Nothing happened.
So what happened with the company?
A year later, because they really reamed me out for that, saying, oh man, you got all this stuff and blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. So a year later, both those records started to hit. Nobody had the record. We were the only one who had the record. So it worked out. So I thought, well, okay, got to move on from here.
Where did you move on to?
Well, I was fascinated with what they call stereo sound. That was something that was brand new at that time. And I was just fascinated with the realness of it. I mean, mono was like this, and stereo was this wide, big, beautiful sound, and it just had a realism to it. And so I worked for a company called Muntz, and they developed a playback head, or actually a record head playback head, that would record 4 tracks in the same direction. And that's who I worked for. And I mean, I just wanted to push the sound of stereo because I thought it helped music so much.
In what time period are we talking about here? This is late 50s?
Yes.
So?
Yeah.
And one of the things I find fascinating about the business back then is that they were like, whatever, it costs more to do this, or it costs more to buy these records in stereo. So
oh God, that was another thing. What happened? I keep thinking it was way back then, but it was later. Now that I think about it, when there was an illness in my family, I had to move back east, and so I ended up moving to Boston, after everything was straightened out with the family. And so I worked for a record store for a while until I was able to get into promotion. They had a distributor that distributed records, and I wanted to get into promotion again. So, but I said, I'll work for the record store now. And again, these hits would come by, and albums were like $2.98 at that time. God, I feel like that's a dark age, it's $2.98. But anyway, and then stereo was $1 more. It was $3.98. And I was always buying stereo, and to push it, because I thought stereo music was much better than mono. And I remember peeling back the back of a label of a jacket, and I said, oh my God, the Supremes album was recorded in stereo. Maybe I'll order it. And I tried to order it, and they said, no, we can't. That crap don't sell in stereo. Well, anyway, we had to buy 25 of it, and my boss had a fit when I bought it. He says, you better sell every one of those, you're going to lose your job. So what did I do? Put it out and started playing it, and people would come in and say, oh, you got the Supremes album? Yeah. And I said, you want it mono or stereo? Which is cheaper? And I'd be furious. I say, listen, you want to hear it like this? Or you want to hear it like that? And they go, oh my God, listen to that. And I'm saying, God, these people know nothing. No, I mean, I was just fascinated that the music was so much more alive in stereo. And I mean, I really feel like I was a pioneer with some of this stuff because people just didn't know. And I think you have to educate people about things or they don't learn anything. How are they going to know? By the time they find out for themselves, I mean, if they're not in the right place at the right time, they're not going to find out till a long time later.
You eventually, after this time in Boston, went to Europe for a tiny bit?
Yeah.
What were you doing over there?
Nothing. I just wanted to go somewhere different. And I was going to go to France, Germany, where else was I going to go? Holland and Switzerland. So I ended up going to Denmark. And I loved it. I said, oh my God, everybody talks soft. And everybody was nice. And nobody had attitudes. And just everybody just went out of their way to be so warm. And I said, God, I'd like to move here. I mean, everybody's just so nice. And I was never exposed to people like that before. And boy, coming back here, oh my God, it was horrible. I mean, I remember we had to go through customs through Canada, and they were under martial law for some reason. There was some terrorists or something. This is back in the early 70s now. And I remember going through customs, and I had all these policemen around in military, and say, open your bag. What's in there? And you go, shuffle it all up. And he said, okay, next. And I say, excuse me. I had that bag neatly folded. Now, God damn it, I can see why people hate Americans so much. I really did. I really felt like I was Danish, and I wasn't going to take that treatment from these lousy, loudmouth Americans. And I really was, I just, I said, hey, I want the bag. I said I had nothing in there, just put it back the way it was. And I said, I'm not leaving. I'm not leaving till you do it. So this other guy came over in the military, and I said, look, blah, 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 blah. Okay, just straighten it out and close the bag. So I went, thank you so much. And then the guy next to me said, do you have anything to declare? No, but my bag is very neat. I just thought that was so funny. I don't know how we got on that subject, but...
Well, why you love Denmark so much? Why did you end up coming back? Why didn't you?
Well, I had to. I had to. The money ran out. I mean, No, but it was funny. Like, I was saying, I was walking through a park. I was in. Oh, this is a funny story. I was in a bar, and not many people speak English. So I'm probably going to get red when I tell this story because it really is funny. And so this guy comes up to me and he says, "V, go home." And I went, "I don't think so." You don't think that's funny? "V, go home." I go, "No, I don't think so." And he kept saying, "V, go home." I said, "Get away from me. What the hell are you doing?" I didn't know that was his name. And I was so, and then I'm saying, "V, go home." "Yeah." And then I'm trying to explain to him how I took it. He didn't get it. And well, anyway.
So you went home to America.
No, I did not go. No. So anyway, I ended up getting to know him because he was really a nice person, but it was so fun. And then I look in the phone book, there's so many Vigo Homes. I mean, my God, I thought Denmark was, that's all, it seemed like everybody had the last name Home. So anyway, he invited me over with some friends to have dinner. So I took a shortcut through the park, and I said, "Oh my God, I can't believe it. I see this old couple sitting on a bench in the park." And there was no one else around. And so I got there and I said, I just saw the most amazing thing. There's this old couple sitting in the park. And they're all looking at me. I said, "Yeah, but in New York, they'd be dead or mugged by now." I mean, that's the thing. And and they just look, yes, they just look like, I was in a totally different world.
So when you got back to that totally different world,
I didn't
what did
like
you
it. I had a hard time adjusting back here because
What were you doing around that time,
what was I doing?
work-wise? You said you'd run out of money.
Well, I came back and I got a job, and I was still modeling. Or actually, I didn't model. No, I went to Europe first because when I left United Artists, that's when I quit the record business, and I lost a lot of weight because I broke a tooth in Denmark. But anyway, that's not a musical story. But
Well, it ended up being a musical story because if you hadn't become a model,
well, then, yeah,
You
because
wouldn't
I
have.
realized, because in the music business, you're constantly, at least if you're in the promotion end of it, you're constantly manipulating people because you're trying to get your record played, and you're conniving and doing all these different things to get your record played. And I just got so sick of doing that. I mean, I just wanted to go in and say, "Hey, this is a great record, play it." And but then I had a better idea. If they're going to associate me with a good record, why not tell them about somebody else's record too? So I would always go in there and say, "Oh, hey, have you heard this song or that song? Well, I think it's going to be a hit." And they'd always take your advice if it wasn't your record. What do you got to gain from it? And then they say, "You got anything of yours?" Actually, no, I don't have anything this week. I really don't have anything that's, competes with those records. But anyway, then when I did have a good record, most of the time I got it on the air because of that. So it worked out well.
so you were the best manipulator of all by.
Well, no, because theoretically I was doing good.
Of course.
I mean, I didn't look at it as,
Yeah.
you know.
So
But-
you're back in the United States. You're modeling. You've given up the record industry. You hate it, the hypocrisy, the manipulation.
Right.
But
And then
it
this
sucks you back.
Oh,
in.
right. So anyway, at the agency I was at, I mentioned that I was, used to be in the music business. And they said, "Oh, do you know John White?" And I go, "Who's that?" And they said, "Oh, he's the guy over there." And he was very British sounding. Little did I know, they call that an effect. Oh, hello. I mean, But anyway, he was a New Yorker, but he had this kind of accent. So anyway, he had a place out in Fire Island, and they said, why don't you come out and see, see what it's like? And I went, wow, okay. So
Sorry, Fire Island, for people who don't know, it sort of had a reputation back then. What did you think when someone said, come to Fire Island?
Well, I didn't hear the reputation. Remember, Fire Island's a very big place. And I think you're referring to the gay community, because there's two areas that it is basically, I think it's a gay community. A lot of people aren't gay that go there, but those two areas. But Fire Island is a tremendous place, and there's other communities which I wasn't aware of.
Well, I just remember reading an interview where you said that you weren't sure if you wanted to go out there because it was
I heard
not
little
well-regarded.
things like that, and I said, okay, but I figured since John owned the place, and we were at the same agency, it was fine. But anyway, they had a thing called tea dance in the afternoon, and I was so fascinated because they were playing soul records, and all these white people are dancing to it. And I went, oh, my God, I found my people. Because I could never understand why I always had I always preferred black music only because I was able to feel it. And I felt like I was very much an emotional sponge when it came to that kind of music, because it just went inside me and affected the way I felt and the way I reacted to the music. And to find other white people that liked that absolutely, fascinated me. And so that's when I got the idea. I was watching how they danced and how they would always...
How did they dance?
Well, they were doing like what they call a shuffle and the hustle. And they, it was basically they were doing 1, 2, 3, 4. And I noticed whenever they left the dance floor, they would leave on 1. And this DJ was terrible. And, the next record would come in and, so you don't know if you're dancing to the last song or trying to, move your feet to the new song. And I thought, well, there has to be a way to do that smoothly where you'd be able to, build them up, where they get excited over the music. And, you can't get very excited over a song if it's only 2.5, 3 minutes long. So anyway, it took me almost 80 hours to do a 45-minute tape. And I had vary speed, so I start a song, and I constantly vary speed it so slow you couldn't tell it was getting faster. But your body would react to it because the intensity was picking up. And then the next song would come in, and the next song. So by the time I got to the last song, you could peel the people off the ceiling. I mean, they were, all worked up. And I just thought that was a fascinating thing to do. So the trick was, I said, if they all leave on 1, then the idea is to get them dancing to a song before you got to 1. So a song would end, it would go da 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 da, and then they're already dancing to it. So they're not going to walk off. They're just going to go with it, and that's exactly what happened. So.
Tell me about putting that tape together. You said it took
80 hours.
So why did it take 80 hours?
Well, because I wanted it to be perfect. I mean, it was.
Can you talk about the construction of the tape, though? Why did it take 80 hours?
I had a Revox tape machine, and it had a little quirk in it. And don't ask me how, but if you had it set up, you EQ it where you get right to the play, and you cue a record, and then you hit record when you want it to come in exactly. You would hear the ambience of the song before, so it sounded like it was a mix rather than, what they call slip cue now, I guess they call it. And I just didn't want the interruption of another song. I wanted it to actually, sound like, natural, if that's the right word to use. Well, anyway, I still remember when I gave him the tape. And he said, "Don't give up your day job." I don't know what. I just was so hurt over that because it took me hours to make that. And I was sitting on a bench where the boat comes, because you have to get to Fire Island by a boat, a ferry. So I was sitting there waiting, and this fella said, "Are you okay?" I said, "Why?" He said, "You look like you lost your best friend or your dog or something." I said, and I explained the story, and he said, he said, "John didn't like my tape." And he said, "Look, the guy's an idiot." He says, "Look, I don't do the music, but my partner does. If you want, I'll let him hear it, you know." And I said, "Okay." He said, "Just put your name, your phone number. We'll call you, let you know." So I gave him the tape, and I got a call that following weekend, and it was Saturday. They called me, and they said they hated it, absolutely hated it. Well, I didn't know what to do. I was so down over that. I said, "Well, maybe I'm wrong." And so 2 o'clock in the morning, I get a phone call, and there's all this noise. And I said, "Oh, these crazy people waking me up." And this happened 3 or 4 times, and finally I just said, I just took the phone off the hook. So the next morning, Sunday morning, I get a phone call, and he said, "Hi, Tom, it's Ron from the Sandpiper. They love the tape." I said, "Ron, I only gave you one tape. You told me they hated it." He said, No. On Friday nights, they want to unwind because they've been working all week in the city, and they want to unwind. And they want familiarity. They want things they know. You've got so much new music on there that they don't know. So on Saturday, they've had the day on the beach, and now they're ready to dance and ready to move, and they want something new. And so Saturday night, they loved it. So, but that's how I got involved, back in, that led to going into mixing in a studio. I mean, so it's fascinating how that I got drawn back into the business like that.
You were going around to record companies because they asked you to make more tapes and looking for instrumentals.
Right.
And then you somehow got involved in mixing tunes.
Well, someone asked me if I could, I did something, experimented with it, and they said, "Well, could you do that in the studio?" Well, I said, "I'm not that familiar with it," but I said, I'll do it the best I can. And of course, everything I was doing was exactly different than how you make a record. So I said, "I want to do this and this and this and that." "Well, that's not how it's done." I go, "Yeah, but I want to do it that way."
What were some of those things that you were doing differently?
Well, I would drop off, I would drop out the vocal, and then I would raise the strings. And they go, "That sounds weird." I said, "It sounds weird to you, but don't sound weird to me." But it seemed like I was fighting all the time. And if one thing I've learned living this long is, if you want to do something and you believe in it, don't let anybody say, "Well, that's not the way it's done." Because you got to follow what you feel. And that's where you get into that place where, when you achieve something, you achieve it because you believed in it. Even though everybody tries to say, no, that's not the way to do it, you do it. Then if it fails, you say, "Fine," but at least you tried. So that's why I like to encourage people to, if they have something they want to try in music, try it. Don't listen to what anybody else says. Try it.
When you turned in your first mix, so they were like, this is not how it's done. You can't do it this way.
Well, yeah. Well, they hated it. The group hated it. And then when they were on Soul Train, when it was a #1 record, "Yeah, that's the way we recorded it." Oh, I was so angry. "Yeah, we did it that way. Yeah, that's the way we did it."
What did you do to the record? And what record are we talking about here?
"Do It Till You're Satisfied," BT Express.
Should we maybe listen to it?
Oh, you have that?
Yeah.
Oh,
I think so.
okay. This wasn't planned. He was playing other songs before us. That's why I'm surprised he has that. people loved it.
You got it, long as it pleases you. Make it last as long as you can. When you're through, it's up to you to try it again.
So what was it that the group hated?
When
About
the
this
organ
song.
comes in, when the organ comes in.
Okay.
Said you cut off my vocal. I said, yeah, but it sounds like the guy got so hot feeling the groove that he hit the organ.
Whatever it is, everybody knows what they like to do. Whatever it is, do it. As long as it pleases you, just take some time.
This song was so suggestive. That's what I loved about it. It was just so.
Then do it. Do it. Do it till you're satisfied. Do it. Do it now. Satisfied. Whatever it is, do it. Till you're satisfied.
See, I think in this country, they really tried to keep white music for white people and black music for black people. I could never understand that. And you know, it's like the South versus the North. In the South, they accept black music because that's the kind of music they play down there. But up here, they just, you know, I mean, I don't know. I could never understand it. That part. Damn. It's just so. So we call the shit. Now, I notice a lot of people tapping their feet, so then that's exactly what it's supposed to do. Shake your bones.
So, how long is this song?
Not long enough. I think it's probably 5:35.
It seems like a lot of your records are 5 minutes and 35 seconds.
It's like when you're successful at something, it's like saying, well, maybe that's a good luck charm. And maybe I didn't plan on making them. Well, maybe when it came to the fade, I might like rush it a little bit so it gets to 5:35. But no, I was quite successful with 5:35.
It's quite, for a pop song, it's quite long, right? And was there a lot of feedback again from people saying you can't put this on radio, it'll never?
Well, that was the whole thing. When we went to master it, the mastering engineer said, "There's too much bass. There's too much low end. You're not going to get any level." So that was with the edited version. So when I went into the studio, I had to remix it because of that. So I said, okay, let's get rid of the low end on the kick drum and put more of a knock. See, as long as you had that kick in there, and I think that had a lot to do with the way, changing the kick to almost where it sounds like a low snare rather than a kick drum.
So that was a pretty big chart success.
Yeah, and the only place from there to go is down. When you go here and then you go, oh, what are you going to follow it up with? Well, and the follow-up was like Al Downing and then Gloria Gaynor, so.
So not a bad second and third act.
Right. But again, all these things, like when people say, oh my God, you created the break and you did the 12-inch and you did this. And I said, yeah, but they're all accidents, every single one of them. Because that wasn't the plan to create it. Like creating the break, a song modulated. So I had to get everything out that was musical. And then I would bring up the conga and the hi-hat just so it'd carry the rhythm. And then when I bring the bass in, or a Fender Rhodes, people say, oh yeah, the song modulates twice. Well, it doesn't. It modulates once. But because you do like 16 bars of just percussion, they don't remember what key it's in. So then it sounds like it modulates again.
Let's talk about one of those accidents, the 12-inch. You go in to mix a record, to put it on acetate, rather.
Right.
and they're out of
They're
the
out of
normal
7-inch blanks.
7 inches.
See, what I would do is I'd be in Philadelphia 4 nights a week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And Thursday, I never slept for like 12 years because I'd come right straight back to New York, and it'd be Friday morning, and then I'd go to Media Sound, which is where I mastered the records. And they didn't have any 7-inch blanks. And I always believe that when you present a record company with something you've done, you ought to present it in its highest form. So if you play it like it's going to sound on a record, then, you know, it'll just, you know, you have everything working in your favor. So they didn't have any. So all they had was 12-inch. I said, oh, my God, what am I going to do? They said, okay, just cut it. So it was cut in spec, meaning you had this disc that was this big, and you had this much groove in the middle. And I go, what is that? I can't give that to somebody. I says, can you, like, start it from there and, like, spread the grooves? You know, just make it where it looks like there's more, you know? Yeah, well, I got to raise the level then. I said, okay, just raise the level. And, of course, it was cut +8. And I said, oh, my God. And then I listened to it, and I went to the record company. They didn't know what the hell to do with that. And then I realized, I said, hey, if my record sounds that much better than everybody else's, I'm not going to tell anybody. You know, I wanted to see the promotion man in me was coming out again, the advantage. So, but that's how it started. But, you know, people say, oh, my God, you created the 12-inch? I went, no, they didn't have any 7-inch blanks. So
It took a long time for, again, this kind of goes back to the mono stereo situation. It took a long time for companies to get used to the idea of a 12-inch and want to make them.
well, like I said, people don't like to change. And I can understand why. Because, you know, it's the unknown that they don't like. So you like the security of what you know. And it's difficult. You always have to prove it in order for them to do it. And when they were making just DJ promo copies of 12 inches originally, and Ken Carey, who owns Salso Records, he says, you know, I'm gonna make a commercial 12-inch. And I said, I don't know. I don't know if it's gonna sell or what. Well, believe me, it sold. And then everybody started making those 12 inches. But people are afraid, you know, they don't want to try something new. And you always feel like you're a pioneer when you sort of step outside or cross that line, because you're all by yourself. And that's when I said earlier, you know, if you have something you believe in, at least develop it to where someone can say, I don't like it, or I love it. But at least get to that place without, well, we were talking, I'll give you another example of what I'm trying to say, is how many people you know that played guitar and they got married, had kids, and they had to give it up. Oh, man, if I kept my guitar, man, I would have blown Jimi Hendrix out of the water. You know, I've heard that story so many times. And I said, well, so you're going to spend your whole life thinking that you would have been this thing and never gave yourself that opportunity. I said, why didn't you wait a year before you got married? At least, you know, oh, yeah, I should have done that. And you know, that's why I say, you know, these little dreams you have and everything, give them a chance, you know, and try it.
So tell me about Gloria Gaynor and working with her.
Yes, working with her. Okay. Never Can Say Goodbye. Well, Honeybee was already recorded, and they were talking about doing an album. And they recorded Never Can Say Goodbye. That was a Jackson 5 record. And they were doing a fast version of it. And because they also, the guys that produced Gloria Gaynor also produced Don Downing and Al Downing, who I mixed both those records earlier. So they asked me to do something with the album. I said, okay. And I said, you know, I had this idea. because DJs are always complaining they have no time to go out and go to the bathroom or have a sandwich. There's no time. I thought, I'm going to do something nice for the DJs. I'm going to make a medley and put it together like it's one song, and it's 18 minutes. So if you can't eat a sandwich in 18 minutes, give up, So anyway, I thought I was being nice to the DJ, and there was no other reason to do it except for that. So I remember finishing it and going back to Jay's office, and then Gloria was sitting there, and he said, "Here, Tom finished the album. Here, let's put it on, see what you think." And so put the needle on, and she's sitting there. So after 18 minutes, so Jay goes, "What do you think, Gloria?" I don't sing much. I wanted to die. I wanted to die. And without thinking, I said, "Well, look, when you perform it live, you just have to pick up on your dance steps. That's all." I mean, I didn't know what else to say. I really didn't. But I said, "Yeah, but I'm doing it for the DJs." I mean, that's why not why I was doing it. I was doing it for her. I was doing it for the DJs.
Were you going out much and clubbing?
No. Because the bass, it was so loud, it was hurting my ears all the time.
But you were talking to them and figuring out what it was that they
Well,
wanted
people would
and
always
what
say,
worked.
"Well, how do you know how to mix a record if you're not watching them dance?" I said, "Trust me, I know what they'll dance to, because I felt it. I go by what I feel."
So you mentioned earlier you were in Philadelphia quite a bit. How did that relationship start with that city? This was with Sigma.
Yes,
right?
it wasn't easy. Because mind you, I wasn't an engineer then. Not that I am now, but I mean I work in Pro Tools. But I knew if I heard something, I know what I want it to sound like. And so when I got down to Philadelphia, I mixed a song called "I Just Can't Say Goodbye" by the Philly Devotions, and I edited it and put it together, and Columbia wanted to buy the master. So they said, "Well, we'll have the tape come up here. What do you want What do you want to try to do?" I said, "Actually, I like that sound that studio has. I'd like to go down there and try it." Well, anyway, I go down there, and I go into I meet the manager of the studio, and we go upstairs to Studio A, and there are all the engineers, the owner of the studio, Joe Tarsha, and I go, "Nick, so the first thing, so you're from New York?" And I go, look behind me. I didn't know what to say. I felt like I was in front of a firing squad. It was embarrassing, "So you're from New York?" "Yeah." "Okay." So I said, "Okay, let's put the tape up, and let me see what's there." And so we played a little bit of it, and I hit the stop button. I said, "Okay, now you hear that? Yes. That's not what I'm looking for." And then I said, I sold the kick drum. I said, "I want the kick to sound like this, and I want the bass to sound like this." "Well, that's not how you do it." I said, "No, that's not how you do it, but that's how I do it." And I wasn't going to accept no, or tell me why. "Because no one else does it." I said, "That's not a good reason. Just because everybody else doesn't do it, I can't do it? I'm sorry, but that's not how I think." And I mean, it would seem like every single rule I wanted to break. But then a lot of them became standard operating procedure. And yet, what they used to do when they make a TV track for an artist, in other words, a TV track meaning if there was a lead vocal and they want to perform it live on television, they'd have a backing track with background vocals without the lead, and she would sing it live. And what they do is they always put it in mono and raise it 3 dB. And I said, no, I want it exactly the same. "Well, that's not how it's done." I said, "There's an ulterior motive for doing it that way." What? I said, because if I have to edit the single and take out a word, and that's why I did a straight instrumental too. So if I wanted to make, I could make an edit anywhere right after a vocal because they're all identical. And they said, well, that's crazy. Nobody does it that way. But then after a while, everybody did it that way because it was so easy to edit. But that's why I was doing it, just for the editing, not because I wanted to make a TV track in stereo the same way as the single sounded. But it's interesting how you go out to do one thing and it creates something else.
Philadelphia had a pretty identifiable sound by that point, and I think
It's called class.
okay.
That sound of that studio, I don't care what it was, but you were like in this other world. I mean, music just, I mean, they had a way of describing it. It's called soul music in tuxedos, if you know what that means.
What were some of the records that
Well, I mean,
made you want to go down there specifically and work in that studio?
oh my God, there's so many of them. Well, the Stylistics and the Delphonics and the Spinners. I mean, songs like that. And, of course, 3 Degrees. And, I mean, just the sound. I mean, it was like classical. It was like soul done classical style.
And Gamble and Huff were the two
Well,
main guys down there?
Well, they thought so. You know, Tommy Bell was there. Tommy Bell was really the one that started the way that sound came about, because the Delphonics were first, and then the Stylistics, and then, you know, the OJs and all the other groups started. But it was basically Tommy Bell first.
And you were spending Monday through Thursday there.
Correct.
So what was it about that city and that studio that kept you down there for
They
so
don't
many
like. Well,
years?
first of all, that room I was very comfortable in. Secondly, New York is like that tempo. Philadelphia. So their idea of rushing is my idea of relaxing. So when you go to a studio here in New York, like if you hired string players, they would come in. All right, hurry up! We got another date downtown, another studio. So you know we can only be here 45 minutes. And I said, Jesus, you know everybody's in a hurry. You know, rush, rush, rush. I mean, come on, down there, like. And I thought, this is wonderful. You know, I really feel like I'm relaxing because I mean I'm New York paced. But down there, it's like hopping off the bandwagon, and it's wonderful.
So let's play a record that you put together in Philadelphia.
Well, there's like 5,000 of them, so.
We'll just play one for now.
Okay. Yeah. Gotta click that one, huh?
this is 11 minutes. So we'll cut it a tiny bit short.
Yeah.
Or a lot bit
Cut
short.
out the good parts. Right.
Should we listen to some more?
You'd be a great serial killer the way you attack the best part of the song. God. You don't have to hear anymore, but it's amazing. This song, I mixed this for an album called
What is this song? by the
Love
way?
is the Message.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, the title doesn't get any better than that. I mixed the song for Gamblin' Huff called "Do It Any Way You Wanna" to show them what I could do. Well, I should probably explain first of all. The general manager of Sigma asked me if I wanted to do something with Gamblin' Huff, and I said, Gamblin' Huff don't need me for anything. I mean, they're doing all their own records, and I was bringing my records down there to work on. And they said, well, you know, Tom, we want to keep it in the family. You know, this is like a family down here. And I went, okay, what have you got? And he gave me some acetates of some albums that were in the can. And he said, see if you find something there you like. So I listened to this one song by People's Choice called Do It Any Way You Wanna. And I said, I can kill two birds with one stone with this. And what it was, people were starting, in New York, were starting to say to me, man, I don't know what they're doing down in Philadelphia, but they're whiting up soul music. I said, what are you talking about, whiting up soul music? All those strings and horns and everything. Man, that ain't the way soul music is. And so I kind of had that in the back of my brain, and I said, all right, do it any way you want. I said, okay, there's no strings and horns on it. I'm going to take that one. And I said, but I got to make it a little slower, just so it's in that aggressive tempo. And it was so funny because at that particular time, at least in New York, people were walking around with boom boxes. And I said, and I just had that in mind when I did this. But I have to stand up and show you what I'm talking about. It's so funny because and when you see somebody doing exactly what you dreamed they'd be doing when they're playing that record, right? They go dum 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 dum, like, better get out of my way, you know. I mean, but the thing was, it was so wonderful to see that because that's exactly, I wanted it to be aggressive. And man, did I start getting phone calls. Because my name wasn't on the record. They left my name off the record. And then I found out later it was because that's the only record Huff ever had that Gamble's name wasn't on. That was a million seller. It just said, produced by Leon Huff. No Gamble on it at all. So I said, okay. But I had more black guys call me up. Can you miss my record? You gonna miss my record? I said, what do you mean? You just do it any way you want? I said, yeah. I said, can you get me that bass sound? They wanted that bass, the way I did the bass on that record. But that's the thing that I love about the music business is when you can turn so many people on to a sound where they just get all excited and it gets into their bones and rattles them. You know, I love doing that. I like to see people react to music because music is a wonderful thing.
Love is the Message, the original, was quite a bit shorter, and you
Yes.
lengthened it.
Right.
And you wanted to add some stuff.
Oh,
to
I
the
tricked.
song.
Oh, you mean that part? Oh, well, first of all, after the success of Do It Any Way You Wanna, Harry Chippets, who was the general manager, said, Tom, why don't you come up with a concept for a Philadelphia International album? I said, okay. And then I thought about it, and I said, you know, I got an idea. Why don't I come up with something called the Philadelphia Classics? And I picked all the songs, And Gamble said, "Why are you using that song? That wasn't a hit." I said, "Yeah, but Kenny, I really like that song." "Yeah, but that's not a hit." I said, "Well, then I'd rather not even do the album." And the song was "Love Is the Message." That was the one that wasn't the hit. And I just wanted to get my hands on that song because I figured that was the closest thing I would ever get to Philadelphia meets the London Symphony Orchestra. I mean, I just thought this was classical soul. I mean, I didn't know, I don't know how else to describe it. But to me, it just has so many movements and passages that just take you to this other place. And then I realized that the one part of the song I have to, I want to extend. And there's just, I listened to it, there's really, Huff wasn't really going crazy on the keyboard. And so they were over at the other studio, 309, which is on the other part of town, and they were working on the Jacksons then. So I got my engineer, I says, "Look, let's hook up the Rhodes, we'll cover it up, and get me a ladder so I can unscrew the record light." He said, "Well, you can't do that." I said, "Damn it, just get me the ladder." So I unscrewed the record light, and Huff came over, and I said, "Listen," I said, "Oh, let me hear I said, "Arthur, let me hear the monitor mix first. I want to make sure that the snare and the bass and the hi-hat are the loudest thing he hears." And he said, "Okay." So Huff comes over, and I said, "Here, I just want you to play from here." And he said, "Okay." I said, "All right, Arthur, roll the tape," meaning, hit the record button. And of course, the light didn't go on in the studio, so it doesn't, so Huff didn't know we were recording. So he's looking at me, he's grooving with it, which I knew he would, and he's looking at me, and I'm going, meaning continue to play. So afterwards, got to the end of the song, and so Huff goes, "Let me hear that back." And Arthur goes, "Okay." And I said, "Okay, what?" I said, "How can you play something you didn't record?" "Oh, that's right, I didn't record it." And I went, "Oh boy, this is going to be fun." So anyway, the song comes out, and Huff caught me going up the stairs one day, and he goes, "Moulton, where'd that piano part come from?" I said, "It was on the tape." That's all I ever said to him. "It's on the tape." Like, "Why are you asking me? It's on the tape."
Just magically appeared
Well,
there.
no, because he couldn't understand where that piano part come from, and he knew we didn't record it. So, and then when I think about it, I mean, Arthur could have got fired over that because that was the studio's biggest client, and you're doing something, behind Cam and Huff's back like that. But it worked out. It was a big success, that record.
Do you have a good relationship with those guys otherwise?
As good as anybody can have with them.
What does that mean?
I think it means exactly that. I mean, they're Gamble and Huff, and I'm Tom Moulton. So we both happen to work in the same field. So there's that mutual respect. But I mean, we're not like pals,
Moving forward, I guess, you worked on a record, I guess, in Philadelphia with Grace Jones. A couple of records.
Yes.
Why do you say yes like that?
Well, Grace Jones, I just wish that she had more talent in the beginning because she had a determination that was so unreal. I've never met anybody like that. I'd say, "Grace, we're going to do this, for this record." And she goes, "Whatever it takes." And she meant it. Whatever it takes, she was going to do it. And I give her a lot of credit. She took the singing lessons. She took this. She took that. And I mean, she was going to make it one way or the other. And she did, but that determination. And it's like when we were doing I Need a Man, I mean, I kept saying to her, you know, I need a man, perhaps a man like you. I said, stop with the Bela Lugosi accent. You know, it's just not working for me, you know. And, you know, I want to suck your blood. It's the same thing she's doing. I said, Grace, you can't, you know, come on, let's try to get rid of that accent. And, you know, I mean, it sounded like I was making fun of her. I wasn't. I was just going crazy with this. When I'm feeling lonely. And I'm saying, what the hell is this? She's American, you know? I mean, where'd she get that accent from? So I'm not easy when it comes to producing, you know, like, and I tell them, I said, I'm not trying to build a friendship here. I'm trying to make you sound the best I can, you know, so.
So are you a real taskmaster in the studio? Is
I'm
that
more
the
of a
way you're
ball
trying
buster, to be honest with you. I really am. It's no, because I don't believe in wasting time in a studio. You know, you rehearse at home or you rehearse in a rehearsal studio, but when you go into the studio, the record button's on because you're basically paying, you know, $125 an hour. That was back then, and I always say it's against you. It doesn't come out of me. It comes out of your money. Just remember that.
So you're not winning friends and influencing people?
I never tried to.
Grace, there was you kind of left before the record was done.
Oh no, she was giving me, you know, after the success of the first album, it was time to do the second album. And her managers, Cy and Eileen Berlin, all of a sudden, they were like the help, the caterers. And she came down and said, oh, Grace, you want some orange juice before you sing? Oh, no, that's all right. I mean, I'll just sit here and rest a minute. And I go, what the hell is this crap? I said, you know, what is this, a soap opera? Come on, we're here to work. And Tom, take it easy with her. She's had a rough day. I said, and I haven't. Come on, let's get going. And, you know, so we're going to the studio, and she really, you know, oh, could I have a cough drop? And I thought, oh, give me a break with this today. So I said, God damn it, Grace, with so little you can please so many. And then I walked back in the control room. I said, okay. So the next thing I hear is, Tom, you know, Grace isn't going to sing to you. Apologize. I said, oh, okay. I picked up my jacket and briefcase and left. And I went back to New York. So I got, you know, about 2 hours later, you know, the phone rings. Hello? Tom? We're in the studio. And I said, well, I hope you're working. And he said, well, how come you're in New York? And I said, well, you said Grace wasn't going to sing unless I apologized. And no way in hell am I apologizing. So it ain't going to happen. So it got kind of testy for a while. So I said, look, let's keep it on a professional basis. When you come down here, you're supposed to know the songs and sing. Okay? That's what I expect from you. And I'll do my job, okay? Fine. And I wouldn't settle for anything less than that. But I didn't like it because you almost have to be a babysitter to everybody. You know, oh, do you hurt your little finger? You want me to kiss it for you? You know, I mean, it's terrible. You got to, they're like, you know, I really had a hard time. You know, I got spoiled by just putting up the multi-track and not having to deal with artists. And then I remember Stevie Wonder came in one time and he said, Tom, you mind if since you're not recording, are you? I said, no, I'm just mixing. He said, you don't mind if I go in there and play piano in the studio? I said, no. And he goes, you don't mind if I smoke, do you? I said, hey, if you want to kill yourself, go for it. I didn't mean for it to come out, but he meant smoke a joint. And I didn't quite understand that whole drug thing, but so he said, okay, all right, yeah, I know. I'll make sure, you know, I smoke towards the back. I said, okay. But that was very funny.
You also recently read that you went to Jamaica at some point and were doing some mixing down there,
Smuggling tapes out.
smuggling tapes out of Jamaica.
Yes. Oh God, did I love doing that? 'Cause I love reggae. So
How did you get? When did you first hear reggae, and how did you become interested in it?
good question. I wish I could remember exactly when I heard it, but when I did, these back in the early '70s, there was this thing. I didn't quite understand it, but where professional people who were making a lot of money could invest in a music project, and say they invested $10,000 and it failed, they could write off more than that. I didn't quite get it, but so I had this idea, like to go down and Studio One, which was an early label down in Jamaica, owned by Clem Dodds, and they did everything 2-track on regular Harman Kardon machines that you'd buy in a in a store. It wasn't professional equipment, and they would record a 2-track and bounce it to another 2-track to mono to have an open track, and then record on that, and then bounce it again back. So back and forth, back and forth. And I had this crazy idea to go down there and get these tapes and sync them up together to have the first stage of each thing. Well, I lost everybody by explaining, oh, take your time, spend as much money as you want. They didn't want me to spend as much money as I could, because when it failed, they'd get this big deduction. Well, Birth of a Legend didn't fail. So that was the Bob Marley and the Wailers album. And they were ready to kill me. So, but at least I got something out of it. And I wonder how I got sidetracked to that story. But
How were you smuggling? You said smuggling tapes. Out
anyway.
of Jamaica.
Clem Dodd, at that time in Jamaica, I guess his name was Manley. And he says, anything Jamaican doesn't leave Jamaica. Now, I had a...
Who's Manley?
Manley was the governor.
Okay.
And this was, like I said, the early 70s. And Clem Dodd, I guess, was connected somehow, because I was a white guy going into these really ghetto black areas, to these places where they had a little shack on the corner, and you have a speaker outside, and they'd be playing this reggae music, and I'd be going there saying, "Oh yeah, I got to get that one, yeah," and they look at me like, God, is he part black or what? It was, he's taking his life in his hands coming here, but it was all about the music. But yet, anytime the name Clem Dodd was mentioned, Clem Dodd's friend, so nobody said anything to me. So anyway, I'm going through customs, and I have my bag is all loaded with Bob Marley tapes and the Heptones, and these guys are really putting people through the ringer. So I said, I know I'm gonna get arrested. I just know I'm not gonna leave the island. I just know it, and I'm shaking and twitching and everything else. So just before I get to open the bag, oh, let's see what you got. Open the bag, do this, do that. So anyway, the cab driver goes over and whispers something to him. And so I start to open my bag. He goes, "Next!" I went, my God, I can't believe this is happening. No, but I mean, next, like, go, get out, I couldn't believe that. But
He said you were Clem Dodd's friend.
Oh, yes. That's all he had to say, Clem Dodd's friend.
Seems like you have a lot of exciting border crossing stories.
Well, you know what? I hate to say that. Well, no, I don't hate to say it because it's true. But I worked for several people like that, and the nice thing about them was they were always as good as their word. They would always, when they said, if they agreed to something, even though it was a bad deal for them, they would honor it because they agreed to it. But I must say, the record company was always tried to, twist and jerk a little bit. They'd always leave themselves some wiggle room so they could say, "Oh, we didn't really mean that."
And you eventually gave up the music business again for a little while, right?
Yeah, well, what happened was
And when was this? Sorry.
1982.
Okay. So after the Grace Jones albums.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. No, what happened was I had an attorney who said, "Oh, you're getting old." I said, "Geez, I'm thinking that's 30 years ago. I'm getting old, and now I'm still doing it." So that didn't work. But anyway, you work hard all your life. I said, "This isn't work. It's fun. Working on music's fun. Why do you think? Why do you think it's? I don't call it work. Call it getting paid for a hobby." But anyway, he said, "Well, we'll do this. I have a deal for you. They'll set you up in an office in New York," which they did. And this is through Casablanca. I had my own label, and you produce 3 albums a year for your label, and then you can keep 3 outside artists. I said, "Okay." So what do I keep? I keep the Tramps. I keep Grace Jones, and I kept Gloria Gaynor. And it was a nightmare. It was absolute nightmare. I did the 6 albums. Like by the end of March, all 6 albums were done, and I couldn't do anything else, and it was killing me, absolutely killing me. And then Neil Bogart died, and Casablanca was owned by or was called Polygram then, and they said, "We have." I love Ecke Schnabel. He's German, and but he was the head of Polydor, Deutsche Grammophon, that whole company, and he says, "We have $100,000 for settlement, and we have 1,000 times that for litigation." So I said, "See you in court." Oh, because it was the principle of it. I said, "You signed an agreement, And so my lawyer, and I said, I was on the phone. This was at Casablanca. And I was in California, and my attorney was also on the line. And I said, "Well, Toby's not going to go for that." And he said, "We know how to handle him." And I went, "Oh my God." And there was silence, and all of a sudden I hear, "Hey, Ecke." It was Toby. And I said, "Am I red now?" Because it's an embarrassing story. But I just couldn't believe it. And after that, I said, "I'm getting out of this business. They're all scumbags." I really mean it. I said, "Why sign a contract and you're not going to honor it?" I couldn't understand that.
So what did you do in those years when you were not doing music?
Let me see. I got a nice condo in Florida, which I hated because I hate the heat. And I lived out in East Hampton. I liked that. That was fun. And then I said, and then someone said, learn to play bridge. It challenges your mind. And, so I became like a junior master at bridge. And I said, I'm still waiting for the mind challenging part because I still, wanted to be, I didn't want to be involved in music. But I mean, that really affected 10 years of my life because what happened was, I came back to the city, and the guy who used to own Salso called me and said, my kids, they're growing up now. I went, oh my God, I can't believe already they're little kids and now they're, in their early 20s. And he said, I'm thinking of starting the label again, and we're going to get this person. And I went, oh my God, you can't get that person. He's a crook. And I said, look, I'll come back and help you set it up. And of course, the minute I got in there, it was like, everyone's saying, God, you're so different, Tom. You seem so up, and and I realized how I was kind of in this coma for 10 years because I didn't react to things because I wasn't involved in the music business anymore.
So Soul Soul brought you back in. What were you doing for them exactly?
Well, it seemed like everything. No, but I was doing mixes again and mastering, and of course, I'm very protective of the tapes of Salso. I was, and then in fact, when they were selling the company, the owner comes in and he said, "We're just getting rid of all these tapes." I says, "But Kenny, you're selling the company." I said, "Those are assets. You don't want to get rid of the assets, do you?" He said, "End of an era." I couldn't believe it. He wanted to throw all those tapes out. And I just said, I'm just gonna stay away from people. Give me the tape. I'll mix the record, and I'll live in my world of beautiful music, and everything is wonderful, you know.
How had the music industry changed in the time that you had left and then you had come back? Did
Well,
it
music
change?
disappeared.
What do you mean by that?
Well, hum me a song that you like. Hum me a Jay-Z record.
I'm not sure I get your point.
Yeah, well, no, but I mean, I love the music. It's like, I'll give you an example. When, here in New York in stores, you'll hear music in a store, and you'll hear some contemporary stuff, and all of a sudden, you'll hear da 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 da, the beginning of "When Will I See You Again," and people always just stop and look up at the ceiling because it's like you're getting bombarded with stardust in heaven, because the music is so beautiful, it just makes you stop. And I'm saying to myself, that's what's missing today, is that part of music, because it's not like that anymore.
So the songwriting, you're saying?
Yeah, and the arrangement and everything, it's more about, I don't know what it's about. It's getting a message out there, but sure ain't love.
Why do you think that's changed?
Well, it's like I say, we always fall back in that safe area. But when young people today have the late 80s and 90s to go back to as what they call music, that's what they're basing everything on. Like I base everything, well, remember I was exposed to music because my parents were musicians, so I heard music when I was, in the 40s, but basically, being, like when you 11, 12, 13, that's when music starts having an effect on you. So basically it should have been rock and roll, but still there were melodies in that stuff. There were beautiful ballads and up songs, but we don't get those today.
You're mixing and still working on new music.
Yes.
These days.
Yes. But I make music, but I try to make it sound real as opposed to being created out of a box.
How do you do that?
Well, if you're used to a drum sounding a certain way or a snare sounding a certain way, you basically want it to sound real. And so I'll do everything to make it sound real, because I can't make it sound not real because it doesn't sound real to me. I know that sounds crazy, but when you're used to strings sounding like strings and horns sounding like horns, but even computer-generated horns, I can make them create the effect that they sound real only because that's the way horns should sound. But a lot of the kids today don't have that to fall back on because they never experienced it.
What sort of setup do you have? You're working from home these
Correct.
days.
Yeah.
It must be quite a bit different than working in an enormous studio. The big
Well, I have a 16-track machine, I have a 24-track machine, I have an 8-track machine, I have a 4-track machine, and a 3-track machine. So no, it's not. And tapes everywhere. Stacks and stacks of tapes. So hopefully I'll live to be 130 and be able to get most of them done. But no, but I'm very content. I mean, it looks like a studio only because there's cables running all over the place. But I work in an old version of what we call Pro Tools. And the reason I work in that old system is because we had plugins that emulated the real reverbs and ambience of those analog sounds. And now things are so digitized, they're so sterile sounding. No matter how much warmth you try to get it on them and ambience, it falls dead. It doesn't sound real. It's like they don't understand what real ambience is about. And I can't work with music like that. In other words, when you hear a record and you go to hear them play at a concert or something, you hear the ambience of the room and everything. It doesn't sound so sterile. So why would you want it to sound sterile on the record? I don't understand that.
What do you listen for in a record when you want to decide to make a mix of it?
Well, I hear something how I would do it. I listen to it and I go, okay. That's only if I'm going to work on something. But most of the time I won't listen like that. I'll just accept it for what it is, and either I like it or I don't.
And what are you working on these days?
Well, I just finished Philly Regrooves 3. It's a series we put out in the UK. And I'm working on one half of the group that used to be called Dry as a Bone out of the UK. And what else am I doing? My God, I'm doing so much stuff. I'm doing some more Philly stuff.
What is it
PIR
about
stuff.
that stuff that really still holds it, you enthralled to it?
But those things sell. Those albums sell very well. The Philly
Regrooves
sound.
compilations.
Yeah, and the Philadelphia classics. It's still a big hit in the UK because people like that music.
What were you going back and doing to some of those records?
Well, it's interesting because some of the ones I mixed like 35 years ago, you go back to it and you say, "My God, how would you approach?" Your head's in a different place. I always like to say, you know a lot more than you did back then. So that kind of helps too. And no, but it's interesting to. I'm always fascinated by what the outcome is going to be because I have a general idea of what it's going to be, but then you hear something that you didn't hear before and you take it in another direction. But it's like anything. You need that, what I call that dangling carrot, to draw you into something to make you want to do it. And I'm very brutal when it comes to some of these things. I had somebody just yesterday send me something. He said, "Well, what do you think of it?" I said, "It's not my kind of thing." I don't know what else to say because I didn't want to say it's a piece of garbage. So, but yet I don't understand it.
I want to open up to questions in just a minute, but I guess the last question I have for you is, back in the 70s, you were a journalist for a little bit. You roll your eyes.
Because I knew about disco, they asked me to write about it. I said, I'm not a writer.
This is Billboard
Yes.
magazine.
Yes, I'm not a writer. And I wouldn't write about my own things. They said, well, why don't you write about Gloria Gaynor? Why don't you about this? I said, I can't write about my own records. And they said, no, you're honest. And I go, wow, that's a compliment, And so I had to think of myself as being objective, writing about it. And it was very interesting how I could sort of, that's like Tom Moulton, the guy who mixes, is different than Tom Moulton, the guy who's typing.
You had, I guess it was a cover story about a record that was selling quite a bit, but radio wasn't playing it. Do I have that right?
What?
Gloria Gaynor, I think?
Oh, Never Can Say Goodbye?
Yeah. Can you just talk a little bit about that and the circumstances of why that was a big deal back then?
Well, see, radio ruled the roost. And it's amazing how, if you don't have competition, there's a certain attitude you have. In other words, like when I had a problem with AT&T many years ago. I got a phone bill for $470. And I said, all these calls were made within a 6-minute period. I said, I'm not paying that bill. And he said, you obviously have a switchboard. I said, a switchboard in my apartment? How can I mean, there were like hundreds of calls made within a 5-6 minute period. And I'll never forget that line. Well, if you don't like it, go to somebody else. Well, who else was there but AT&T? There was nobody else. So you have that attitude when you have no competition. And radio had that arrogance about them. Because, hey, if we don't play it, it don't happen. Well, how can a record sell 10,000 copies a week in New York City and not one radio station was playing it?
How did it happen?
Because all the discos were playing it.
Let's open it up to questions.
Okay.
Does anyone want to ask Mr. Moulton something? Could you just wait for a microphone real quick?
Hi. Hi. Do you think the limitation of time back when there were established studios, not home studios, helped to create good records, and nowadays having a home studio where it's constantly accessible diminishes the value?
No, because again, it's like there are people who are always going to be creative with what they have to work with. And example, this, I'm trying to think of the first part of their name, Daft Punk. That song, I mean, that drives me crazy. I love that song, that hook. I mean, that's why they call them hooks. Now, that's created out of samples, but it's a damn good record. So the point is, they're using the same thing everybody else can do, but they did it one better. So that's the point. So I say, no, it doesn't diminish. As long as it has something that makes people want to go out, like, I can't wait till that CD comes out so I can buy it. So, but I don't think it diminishes. You're not dealing with the same kind of elements, that you did back then. Because I've had people come over to the house that, especially from the UK, and I'm going to mix something, say, what are you working on? I said, I'm working on some 64-track thing. They go, 64 tracks? How can you concentrate on all those tracks at the same time? I said, well, you just do, because that's what I'm used to doing. And they're used to doing one and one and one and one and building something like that, where I'm dealing with this whole, orchestra.
Thanks.
Yeah. Did that
Yeah.
answer it? Okay. Oh, the other one I like too is That Only You. You know who That Only You by? Well, you'll know what it is. It's another English record, but my God, that thing is awesome. No, but I mean, it's very clever how it's done, and it makes you, you feel it inside. So it can be done.
Any other questions? One, I think.
Mr. Moulton, nice to meet you. And you seem to have a huge collection of tapes, and just being friends with Coxsone Dodd, which is this legend, and I couldn't help but think about like your favorite pieces of tape, or can you point us something you're really fond of, and some like estimate piece of music you have with you in your files.
I know I should have brought something. I'm going to quote somebody here by saying, "Oh, we have everything we need."
Sorry about that.
Hey, I got to pass the buck on that one, because I did mention about bringing something. No, Todd has everything. So I'm not trying to embarrass you. So how do we get out of this, Todd?
Well, why don't you just name a couple of
Oh, okay.
things?
Good
do
idea.
that.
Philadelphia, you had the Philadelphia Classics?
Yeah, I think so. You could just
Well, you could be
also
a little
name
more
them.
excited about it than, yeah, you know.
Yes, they have the 4 CD
Yes, all right.
thing.
All right, play The Devil Made Me Do It.
Okay, just 1 second.
Now, I have to explain this. The Devil Made Me Do It is by Robert Upchurch, he's the other lead singer of the Tramps. And he did this song back in the early 70s, and I thought it was okay. So I got the multi-track to do for this box set, and I realized the song went 6 minutes long. And when I listened to it, I was so fascinated. It slowed right down, and it was almost like a waltz. I said, "You got to be kidding me." And so now, because of technology, you can change the tempo without changing the key. And to make this where it's consistent, I mean, it did take some time, but it's possible now. And so I was able to utilize how what I call the magic of Philadelphia. When those guys lock in together, nobody can touch them. There's a soul and a feel to it. And I mean, that whole, the last 3 minutes of that song drives me absolutely out of my mind. I mean, I just think it's one of the greatest things. And, you know, maybe we could play it. But I mean, I really had to like alter it to make it work. See, now this part of the song is all right to me, but this to me is setting up what's coming next, which is the part that like really gets me.
Cause I need an alibi. Cause to tell you the truth would only make you cry. Ooh, I know I'm doing wrong when I stay out all night long, but the devil made me do it. The devil made me do it. And I know I'm acting strange, but I swear I'm not to blame. Devil made me do it. Devil made me do it. I just don't know what's going on.
See, and also the vibe wasn't on this take, it was on another take, but I liked it so much. In fact, it's almost a contrast. The devil made me do it. He's playing all these angelical kind of swirls. I'm saying, I guess there must be a devil up there.
Help me make a stand, yeah. Ooh, Lord, yeah. I just don't know.
You know, this is coming up where it slows right down.
Hey, I feel it. It's coming. It's coming over me again. Hey, mama. Hey, look here. Hey, yeah, well, I know all that. I know I got somebody else. But hey, don't kiss me like that. Hey, girl. Look, I can't help myself sometimes, you know. Hey, come on, now, don't stop playing, man. Hey, man. Hey.
See, it's in that pocket where it's not fast, it's not slow, but it's just got that groove. It's just, now listen how they start playing. You see how they kind of lock in. Oh, God. See, it's the way Norman plays the guitar now. Now you all know I cheated on that because those vibes weren't really there. I flew them in. But it has that feel. I mean, it just, you don't hear that all the time, you know? And a lot of times, you know, in Philadelphia, after 3 minutes, if they let the tape run, then they would just jam, you know. Then it would all be feel, and that's what you're selling is the feel. That's why you react to music, because you feel something with it. You feel a connection to it.
Don't get me wrong. Listen, I know you're number one, but the others are so much fun. Must be voodoo. Got to be voodoo. Oh,
at the end, Norman played 2 guitar chords that absolutely drive me crazy. I don't know why. He only played it twice, but I flew it in each time at the end coming up. I don't know why they drive me nuts. Not yet. Coming up. Jesus. I don't. No, but I mean, you know, when you can't explain why music does that to you, I mean, I could hear that for a half hour, that thing, just playing that over and over, and I can't tell you why. It's just that it feels so good inside to me to hear that.
Did you take out the low end in the kick drum, or the drummer just doesn't play anytime, it's just automation and
Yes, it's called Moulton removal.
yeah.
Got rid of the low end.
It's really catchy.
But that's, you know, in other words, the company kept saying, how come you've worked on that song for 3 weeks? And I said, I'll work on it for 6 months until it's done. I don't give a damn. I said, because I love this song so much. And they go, yeah, but, you know, it's not like backstabbers or this or that. I said, I really don't care. Because that's what, because by doing the work on this one motivates me to do all the other ones. Because I wasn't going to let this song beat me. I mean, I had such a hard time with that tempo, getting the tempo up right. And then the tempo kept changing, and I had to kind of smooth it over. And it was really frustrating. I couldn't work on it like, you know, all at the same time. I had to stop and work on something else for a minute and then go back to this. But, no, I had in my mind that I wanted this to be a certain way, and that's the way it was going to end up.
Oh, sorry. Can I? Oh, okay. I have a really quick question. Where was the studio, or should I say studios, located in Philadelphia?
Well, they were, like, Sigma was at 212 North 12th Street.
Okay.
Right near the convention center. And 309 is 309 South Broad Street, which used to be early rock and roll studio called Cameo Parkway.
Okay, cool. I'm from Philadelphia.
Oh,
that's what I'm
okay.
asking. Born in
Okay.
the city, grew up in Bucks County.
Oh, okay.
Yep. Cool.
You mentioned earlier on your recording with Grace Jones that you told her, go back there, just sing the song, you know, the right words, right lyrics, the right vocals. At which point do you want to receive work from someone in order for it to be not a beginning, like a sketch of a work, not overworked, but at a point where they can show, let's say, they can show the idea or the progress of something, but that's something, that piece of music shouldn't be overworked, so it becomes dead, especially since it's work from someone not professionally trained to mix or produce things. But, you know, we just want to push forward the idea, but not make it sound too, you know, false at the ends before it gets to the hands of someone who knows how to do it.
I don't know. I don't know. Maybe it's a gift. I don't know what it is. But when somebody sends me, like, they'll say, well, you know, we want you to mix this track. Well, I have to hear it first. And they said, well, we should work out the business first. I said, why should I work out the business if I'm not going to do it? I want to hear it first. Then we can talk business. And so a lot of people feel that's strange. And I said, if you think I'm just doing it for the money, you better go to somebody else, because that's not it, you know. And I find it sometimes it's difficult. And they'll say, well, you know, it's not really finished. I said, I don't expect it to be. Let me hear the song, and then we can talk about it. And so many times I hear something, I go, wow, that can really be something, because it's really good. Now, mind you, it may not sound good, but I hear all the elements in it the way I think they should sound, and then I realize how good it is. I listen to the words and the melody or whatever. Or sometimes it's just one of those catchy things. Like we were talking about earlier, that what is it called? Get It? What's the song called? Daft Punk Dap? Get Lucky. Yeah. Oh, damn. You know. No, I mean that's why they call them hooks. I mean, you know, that's what makes the music business exciting when you hear something like that that turns a lot of people on.
That brings up an interesting point because I think you've always said that you've aimed for commerciality as opposed to being obscure in a way. That pop songs, hooks, are something that you're unashamedly going for.
But that's why
passionate
they
about.
call them hooks. Like I was going around, and I'm sorry, but Call Me Maybe, to me, was the best song last year because of those damn violins. Those violins were so... the minute I heard it, I went, what is that record? I got to get it. I got to have it. No, I mean... But that's the side of the music business that I like because it motivates me. And if it motivates me, it's sure in hell going to motivate other people who are a lot younger than me. But it was those strings. I says, my God, that it's incredible. And what do they get? 300 million hits on YouTube, that song? Psh, could see why.
Other question back there?
I do. I'm glad you played that song. I got to collect my thoughts. I wanted to, is it okay to ask like 2 questions?
Go for
You
it.
can ask 3.
Okay. The first one, you said you recorded Huff, right?
Yeah.
I found it interesting because I listen to like a lot of jazz, and I find that the first take is usually the best take, and the second take and the third take is like a lot of artists, if they don't make it in the first 3 takes, they're like, okay, I'm coming back tomorrow, and I'll do it again because that's where you really.
Well, let me explain
catch it.
something to you. First of all, you have to remember, and everybody who has been a producer or have worked on this or recorded an artist, the one lie, and it is a lie, is this: I can do it better. Always remember that, especially when you only have one track and you go, oh, okay. And the greatest performance you just erased. And the thing is totally different than what was there, and you want to kill yourself. And so when anybody says that, okay, we have another open track. So,
Yeah, I see that a lot, especially with recording myself, and after the first take, I'm like, if it's not good,
no,
this
because
time,
you're trying to refine it, and,
Yeah.
and the very thing that made it work isn't there. That spontaneous thing.
it being natural and all.
I
that,
know exactly.
So my first question was, do you think that song would have done what it had done had he let me come back? Like, him
Well,
not
first of
knowing
all,
you were recording?
remember he didn't know we were recording
Yeah.
him.
It's important to trick people into thinking
That
they're not
too,
recording.
I find
So,
that too.
in other words, say, yeah, let's do another one. He'd look at the light, the record light. Because if we're, and then, I didn't tell you the rest of the story is when he said, I don't think it's going to work. I said, yeah, you're right, Huff.
So that's basically my first question. My second one was more like, it was kind of a comment and a question. I've been around like the Midwest and the East Coast and the South and all that. My dad's from Mississippi, so I grew up listening to a lot of stuff that you worked on. And my thing is, when you said something about listening to a Jay-Z song and the feeling and all that, like I was gonna say that as far as from what I've seen in terms of my generation and people I've been around, just like a lack of respect for love, which is why the music is like changed and kind of declined. And there's also more of a respect for money. And I was really want to see what you thought about that in terms of the era that you've come through in music and worked with people.
Well, it's funny. I can never put a dollar value on what I do because I'm not doing it for the money. I know that sounds crazy, but
It doesn't.
there's a feeling you get inside here that money just cannot buy. And some people get it and some people don't. And I that's what keeps me alive and keeps me going. I mean, it really does, because I always have something great to work on and something that, emotionally stimulates me. And I just hope I'm doing it in a way where other people can also relate to it. I was telling, people will say like mixing, people who aren't in the business, mixing, what is that? I said, well, you have all these different tracks, like say 24 tracks, and you got a kick drum, a snare, this and that. Yeah, okay, but what do you do? I said, well, I pan it here, put this on it and that. Okay. Oh, well, like, they name me some songs. I go like more, Andrea True, and Instant Replay, and I'm trying to mention, all the biggies, disco, and they say, yeah, and I go, yeah, I did Dr. Love. You did Dr. Love? Everybody always, when I say you did Dr. Love, I don't know why that triggers that something about that song. But it's always that reaction every single time I mention Dr. Love. I say, you did Dr. Love's first track. I got married to that record. I went, oh, okay. But that's how I felt when I did, because I had a heart attack doing that record. I was so frustrated.
Why?
Because the tempo, when Earl changes hi-hat pattern, he slows down. And, of course, we didn't have that luxury, so I had to do the very speed. Oh, it was a nightmare. And I said, Jesus Christ! And I felt this electricity go through my arms. And I just put my arms down. I took a step. Everything stopped. I started to fall, and then it went back up.
I think they changed it because they wanted to. I mean, they use all of that content now for like other websites and other places.
I mean,
So like I'd go to like Barnes and Noble, for example, and they had like an all music taken from their website.
yeah, but they used to have that before.
Yeah.
You go to the artist or anything, and you click on it, and you get the title.
But I'm
And
saying
then and then you have there would be a little, on the upper right, it would say, buy now, Barnes & Noble, and you click on it, and you go right to Barnes & Noble. They used to have that, too.
yeah.
So,
I think they optimized it though for that.
well, it
type
takes
of
care of
thing.
that. Now, what's the other thing? That's the other advantage now.
There's no other advantage.
Exactly, so.
I think it's funny when things like that change and you're just immediately like, well, this thing that I used for a dime, I
downsides about being older is you remember when quality was something, and that seemed to go out the window.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple people trying.
Yeah, name one. Where are all these kids from?
All over the world.
Wow.
There's, I think, there's 2 terms of the academy, so there's 2 weeks and then another 2 weeks, and it's different participants.
Ah, I see.
And
Okay.
over the whole thing, it's 30 countries.
Wow.
Yeah. So a lot of people, English may not be their first language.
I mean, we're here, there's the menstrual, like stuff like that. I love accents. I'm absolutely so fascinated by accents.
Yeah. What's your favorite one?
Well, not the English accent, I'll tell you that. We use these words like natter and
Sure.
everything is sorted out. How do you sort it out? They use that for everything. I'll say, you have these records, and we'll sort it out. I go, I didn't ask you to sort, I just asked you if you had the record, you know. Oh my God, look at that. I'm wondering when you're gonna bring your body in. You know? Wow. Morning? Is it good morning?
Maybe time zone.
Oh, okay. You filled them up, huh?
Good? Yep.
Yeah.
I'll take it. Well, welcome to the first lecture of the 2013 New York Red Bull Music Academy. I have the distinct honor of sitting next to a man who is responsible for a lot of firsts. Remix, 12-inch, breakdown. Mr. Tom Moulton, please give him a hand.
Thank you.
I guess speaking of firsts, what was the first record that you ever bought with your own money? Do you remember?
I remember, but unfortunately no one else in the room would remember. I was 6 years old, and I begged my mother to buy me 1 O'Clock Jump by Count Basie. Anybody remember that?
I remember it.
You remember Count Basie? Good.
So were your parents into music?
Well, they each had, they were both musicians.
What kind of musicians?
Well, they thought that they were jazz musicians. I mean, they, to me, were, wedding and, that kind of thing. My father had a quintet, and my mother had a quartet, and they couldn't play together at all because my father's timing was so bad. And she would just come home and fight all the time, saying, why'd you come in? You came in 2 beats too early, and and then my father considered himself a jazz musician. I think that's why his timing was kind of loose when it came to that sort of thing.
So it saved the marriage that they were not in the same group.
No. By the time the 5th kid was born, bye.
So which one were you? of those
I was
five?
the oldest. I'm the first.
Okay.
So
And growing up, so you had jazz in the household. What other sorts of music
pop.
were in the household?
Well, how can I say that? I think I grew up in a wonderful time. I was born in 1940, And during the 40s, jazz played a very important part in pop music. And the music to me was incredible in the 40s because of the melodies and the beauty of it and these intricate timings they had. And then, of course, to be a teenager in the 50s when rock and roll started, I mean, to me, that was one of the greatest things in my life, to have this totally different kind of music. And everyone said, oh, that crap will never last. And of course, it's still around. So it's like dance music. You know, it's been around since anybody could play an instrument. And, you know, we call it different things now, but it's still dance music. People still like to get up and react emotionally to music. So,
Speaking of rock, I think you went out to California with the dream of being a DJ, a radio DJ, like Alan Freed.
well, actually, that was here.
Okay.
That was here, and then I got very disappointed that they took money to play a record, and I thought, how can you take money to play something? You know, I couldn't relate to that because I thought my dream was, to find a record that I like and play it for somebody on the radio, and everybody would like it, and they'd get all excited and everything. And then I said they did it for money, I don't understand that. And I said, well, did they like the record? Well, no. If they got the money for it, they'd play it. And I go, well, how do you have any credibility? And I couldn't understand that. So I said, I don't want to be part of that. So I said, as long as I'm involved in the music, somehow I'm going to stay involved with it.
And how did you first get involved with the industry, so to speak?
Well, when I was a kid, I worked in a record store. I mean, I'd always go in and ask for a record, and they'd say, oh, who does that? And I would say who it was, and I'd say, well, can you order it for me? And they got so sick of me coming in and asking for a record all the time, they said, look, we'd like you to maybe order the 45s for us, or the 78s and 45s back then. And they said, we'll give you $10 a week plus 5 45s. And I thought, oh man, this is big time. You know, when you're a kid, to get, $10 plus 5 records. And I said, oh my Lord, I just couldn't believe it. And I did very well. And then I did it with the other store in town. And I said, I'd like to, order the records here for. And I worked for the other store. And they said, well, what are they giving you? And I said, well, they give me $15 a week and 10 45s. So I learned quickly about the music business.
So I wanted to play a song and see if you remember it. Early on in your music career, this is a song that I think meant.
Shouldn't you not be fine? Shouldn't you lower that a little bit before you? Okay.
I'm not getting anything
Because
at
of
all,
an earlier experience today.
Each time I see you
Oh my God, that's when I worked at Seabury.
I fall.
So what is this record?
It's I Fall to Pieces by Patsy Cline. When I went out to California, I lied about my age. Because you didn't have to to get a driver's license in California or whatever. All you had to do was say, oh, I'm 20 or 21. And I was only 17. And so I said I was 21. And I was able to get a driver's license, and that was my ID if I wanted to go to a bar. I wasn't big on drinking anyway. But anyway, I worked for Seaberg. And Seaberg, they made jukeboxes. And they had what they call a one-stop, meaning that instead of going, like if you wanted to buy records from RCA, you'd go to RCA Distributor and buy them, and then you go to Columbia, or you go to EMI, or you go to all these different labels, and they would be like 41 cents. Now, if you went to a one-stop, the records might be 44 cents. but you're paying for the convenience of only going to a one-stop to get all the records you wanted without going to all these different labels. And in those days, if you bought a record before it became a hit, say if you bought 500, you'd get 250 of them free. And so I was pretty good at that, and that's one of those records that I bought, and I got 250 free, and nobody bought it. And then that happened to another record by a Southern guy called Ernie K. Doe not Ernie K. Doe, it was Jesse Hill, called Oop Oop A Doo. And I just thought that was one of the greatest records. Nothing happened.
So what happened with the
A
company?
year later, because they really reamed me out for that, saying, oh, man, you got all this stuff and blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. So a year later, both those records started to hit. Nobody had the record. We were the only one who had the record. So it worked out. So I thought, well, okay, got to move on from here.
Where did you move on to?
Well, I was fascinated with what they call stereo sound. That was something that was brand new at that time. And I was just fascinated with the realness of it. I mean, mono was like this, and stereo was this wide, big, beautiful sound, and it just had a realism to it. And so I worked for a company called Muntz, and they developed a playback head, or actually a record head, playback head, that would record 4 tracks in the same direction. And that's who I worked for. And I mean, I just wanted to push the sound of stereo because I thought it helped music so much.
And what time period are we talking about here? This is late 50s?
Yes.
So?
Yeah.
And one of the things I find fascinating about the business back then is that they were like, whatever, it costs more to do this, or it costs more to buy these records in stereo. So
Oh God, that was another thing. What happened? I keep thinking it was way back then, but it was later. Now that I think about it, when there was an illness in my family, I had to move back east, and so I ended up moving to Boston after everything was straightened out with the family. And so I worked for a record store for a while until I was able to get into promotion. They had a distributor that distributed records, and I wanted to get into promotion again. But I said, I'll work for the record store now. And again, these hits would come by, and albums were like $2.98 at that time. God, I feel like that's the dark ages, $2.98. But anyway, and then stereo was $1 more. It was $3.98. And I was always buying stereo, and to push it, because I thought stereo music was much better than mono. And I remember peeling back the back of a label of a jacket, and I said, oh my God, the Supremes album was recorded in stereo. Maybe I'll order it. And I tried to order it, and they said, no, we can't. That crap don't sell in stereo. Well, anyway, we had to buy 25 of it, and my boss had a fit when I bought it. He says, you better sell every one of those, you're going to lose your job. So what did I do? I put it out and started playing it, and people would come in and say, oh, you got the Supremes album? Yeah. And I said, you want it mono or stereo? Which is cheaper? And I'd be furious. I say, listen, you want to hear it like this? Or you want to hear it like that? And they go, oh my God, listen to that. And I'm saying, God, these people know nothing. No, I mean, I was just fascinated that the music was so much more alive in stereo. And I mean, I really feel like I was a pioneer with some of this stuff because people just didn't know. And I think you have to educate people about things or they don't learn anything. How are they going to know? By the time they find out for themselves, I mean, if they're not in the right place at the right time, they're not going to find out till a long time later.
you eventually, after this time in Boston, went to Europe for a tiny bit.
Yeah.
What were you doing over there?
Nothing. I just wanted to go somewhere different. And I was going to go to France, Germany. Where else was I going to go? Holland and Switzerland. So I ended up going to Denmark. And I loved it. I said, oh my God, everybody talks soft. And everybody was nice. And nobody had attitudes. And just everybody just went out of their way to be so warm. And I said, God, I'd like to move here. I mean, everybody's just so nice. And I was never exposed to people like that before. And but boy, coming back here, oh my God, it was horrible. I mean, I remember we had to go through customs through Canada, and they were under martial law for some reason. There was some terrorist or something. This is back in the early 70s now. And I remember going through customs, and I had all these policemen around in military, and say, open your bag. What's in there? And you go, shuffle it all up. And he said, okay, next. And I say, excuse me. I had that bag neatly folded. Now, God damn it, I can see why people hate Americans so much. I really did. I really felt like I was Danish, and I wasn't going to take that treatment from these lousy, loudmouth Americans. And I really was. I just, I said, hey, I want the bag. I said I had nothing in there. Just put it back the way it was. And I said, I'm not leaving. I'm not leaving till you do it. So this other guy came over in the military, and I said, look, blah, 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 blah. Okay, just straighten out and close the bag. So I went, thank you so much. And then the guy next to me said, do you have anything to declare? No, but my bag is very neat. I just thought that was so funny. I don't know how we got on that subject, but...
Well, why you love Denmark so much? Why did you end up coming back? Why didn't you?
Well, I
move
had
there?
to. I had to. The money ran out. I mean, No, but it was funny. Like I was saying, I was walking through a park. I was in. Oh, this is a funny story. I was in a bar, and not many people speak English. So I'm probably going to get red when I tell this story because it really is funny. And so this guy comes up to me and he says, "We go home." And I went, "I don't think so." You don't think that's funny? "We go home." I go, "No, I don't think so." And he kept saying, "We go home." I said, "Get away from me. What the hell are you doing?" I didn't know that was his name. And I was so, and then I'm saying, "We go home." Yeah. And then I'm trying to explain to him how I took it. He didn't get it. And well, anyway.
So you went home to America?
No, I did not go. No. So anyway, I ended up getting to know him because he was really a nice person, but it was so fun. And then I look in the phone book, there's so many Vigo homes. I mean, my God, I thought Denmark was, that's all, it seems like everybody had the last name Home. So anyway, he invited me over with some friends to have dinner. So I took a shortcut through the park, and I said, "Oh my God, I can't believe it. I see this old couple sitting on a bench in the park. And there was no one else around." And so I got there and I said, I just saw the most amazing thing. There's this old couple sitting in the park, and they're all looking at me. I said, "Yeah, but in New York they'd be dead or mugged by now." I mean, that's the thing. And and they just look. Yes, they just look like, I was in a totally different world.
So when you got back to that totally different world,
I didn't like it. I had a hard time adjusting back here because.
What were you doing around that time?
What was I doing?
Work-wise, you said you'd run out of money.
Well, I came back, and I got a job, and you know, I was still modeling. Or actually, I didn't model. No, I went to Europe first because when I left United Artists, that's when I quit the record business, and I lost a lot of weight because I broke a tooth in Denmark. But anyway, that's not a musical story. But
Well, it ended up being a musical story because if you hadn't become a model,
well, then yeah,
You wouldn't
because I
have.
realized because in the music business, you're constantly, at least if you're in the promotion end of it, you're constantly manipulating people because you're trying to get your record played, and you're conniving and doing all these different things to get your record played. And I just got so sick of doing that. I mean, I just wanted to go in and say, hey, this is a great record, play it. And but then I had a better idea.